Black female CEO denied first-class boarding. Until she makes one call and shuts the entire airline down. She had the ticket. She had the name. She had built a billion-dollar company from scratch. So why, standing at the boarding gate of Flight 227, was Dr. Celeste Morgan, an acclaimed black tech CEO, being asked, again, to prove she belonged. What made a gate agent doubt her identity? What made a supervisor escalate instead of listen? And what made a young passenger in seat 2C hit record? Changing everything. This is just a story about one woman being humiliated before a plane takes off. It's about how institutions fail, how silence enables injustice, and how a single moment of calm courage can spark a national reckoning. Who gets to belong in first class? Who decides what professionalism looks like? And what happens when the woman they underestimated turns out to hold the power to rewrite the rules? If you're ready for a story that will shake you, move you, and stay with you, hit like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel now. Because what happens next, you won't see coming. Now, let's begin. The first thing, Dr. Celeste Morgan noticed as she boarded Flight SW312 from Chicago to San Diego was how quiet the cabin felt. It was that rare moment just before takeoff when the energy hadn't yet shifted into business mode, before laptops opened and noise-canceling headphones slid over ears. It was, she thought, a pause in the air. The gate agent hadn't looked her in the eye when scanning her ticket. A small thing. But Celeste had learned to log small things, like how the man in front of her was greeted with a smile and a welcome aboard, Mr. Radcliffe, but her own name, Dr. Morgan, was read with mild confusion, like a technical glitch, nothing malicious, just another microfracture in a long mosaic of being underestimated. She carried nothing but a leather tote, slim and organized. She hated roller bags. They always felt clumsy. And today, she needed clarity. Her seat assignment, 3A first class. Not that it was unusual. At 44, Celeste was a regular flyer, and a premium one. CEO and founder of Equinox Learning Systems, a fast-growing tech company building AI-based tutoring software for underserved schools. Her itinerary was tied a one-day conference appearance in San Diego, followed by a meeting with the State Education Board, a potential $50 million partnership in the making. The kind of opportunity that didn't just change company forecasts, it changed futures. But none of that seemed visible to the man sitting in seat 3B. As she stowed her tote and fastened her belt, the man tan, blazer on shoulders type, glanced over and gave her a once-over. "I think you may be in the wrong section," he said lightly, almost amused. Celeste didn't look up. "I'm not." He gave a polite chuckle, the kind people use when they think you've misunderstood something very basic. "No, I just meant," he gestured at the seat. "This is first class." She turned to meet his gaze, her voice calm. "I know where I am." For a moment, he blinked, then smiled, nodded, and turned away. But the air had changed. The flight attendants bustled through pre-takeoff checks. A woman with platinum hair and a sharp jawline approached. Her name tag read Cynthia Brandt, Senior Purser. "Mom," Cynthia said, with a practiced smile, "can I take a quick look at your boarding pass?" "Please," Celeste blinked once. "You already scanned it at the gate." "I understand. It's just a routine verification. Some last-minute upgrades happened, and we're ensuring everything's correct." Celeste held her gaze. "You didn't ask anyone else." Cynthia's smile tightened. "It's standard protocol." Celeste reached slowly into her coat pocket and handed her the pass. Cynthia inspected it longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said finally, handing it back. "Enjoy your flight. Celeste didn't respond. She turned toward the window and watched as a marshaller guided a luggage cart across the tarmac, rain collecting in small reflective pools. She could already feel the burn behind her eyes, the kind that came not from anger, but from weariness. It was always something. A glance, a doubt, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Even here, 30,000 feet above the ground. She couldn't outrun the subtle question that always followed her, do you belong? The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane began to taxi. Celeste exhaled slowly, grounding herself. In her mind, she started rehearsing for tomorrow's pitch, the talking points, the pilot program data, the early success stories. She thought of the little boy in Baltimore who'd used Equinox reading module to jump 2 grade levels in 6 months. His mother had sent an email, crying with gratitude. This is why she flew. This is why she fought. The plane lifted from the ground, and for a brief moment, gravity released its grip. 10 rows back in economy. Amira Morgan tapped through her mother's Instagram story. Landed in Chicago. Celeste had posted early that morning with a photo of O'Hare's rainy runway. Amira smirked. Of course she didn't include a selfie. At 17, Amira had learned her mother's language proud, but private. Present, but always working. Their conversations lately had been clipped. Her mother was always just about to board or heading into a meeting. There were moments Amira felt like her mom was building a better world for every child, but her. But she also knew what this trip meant. If the California board said yes, thousands of schools would get access to tools they'd never afford otherwise. Still, she missed her, and she hated flying coach while her mom was up in first. Back in 3A, Celeste leaned back into her seat. The air felt cooler now. She tried to ignore how Cynthia kept looking at her, as if waiting for something. Then came the tray. Would you like a beverage? Cynthia asked. Still water, please. Cynthia nodded and walked right past her to serve rows 1 and 2 first. Celeste closed her eyes. Small things. Always small things. Doctor, Celeste Morgan sipped the lukewarm water that had finally arrived, served last in the row as if by design. She didn't complain. She didn't sigh. Years of practice had taught her not to hand people a reason to label her difficult, especially not in the sky. Cynthia Brandt had resumed her rounds, her voice crisp and chipper as she offered snacks to the white couple across the aisle. We have a charcuterie plate, a grilled chicken wrap, or a lentil bowl. Oh, and fresh fruit if you'd prefer something light. They ordered with easy charm. Cynthia laughed at something the woman said, her entire posture soft and open. Then she turned to Celeste, and the temperature seemed to drop. And you, Dr. Morgan, was it? She knew the name. It was on the boarding pass she'd scrutinized like it was forged. Yes, Celeste replied evenly. I'll take the lentil bowl, please. Cynthia didn't smile. Well, see what we have left. No apology. No attempt to mask the implication that Celeste's request came last again. Celeste pressed her thumb gently against the edge of her tray table. It clicked, then clicked again. That little mechanical feedback loop grounded her, kept her quiet. She didn't want to escalate. Not here. Not like this. The man beside her, 3B, hadn't said another word since the seat mix-up comment earlier. But Celeste could feel his discomfort. It radiated off him in fidgety glances, and how he shifted every time Cynthia passed by without interacting with her. Eventually, he cleared his throat. Sorry again for... Before, he murmured, not looking at her. Celeste tilted her head slightly. For what? He paused, lips tightening, for assuming, earlier. She let the silence stretch. Some people just look like they belong here more than others. I guess, he added, trying to joke, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed with lightness. Celeste turned to face him now. And what does someone who belongs look like? He winced. That came out wrong. It came out honestly. The man didn't reply after that. 30 minutes into the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin gently. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked on, casting an orange glow against the ceiling panels. Celeste placed her tray back onto the armrest and exhaled. The motion of the plane reminded her of Amira as a baby, how she used to rock her in slow, bouncing steps to calm her crying. Celeste hadn't thought about that in years. Those early months, alone, sleepless, and scared, balancing diapers and deadlines. Now Amira was 17 and too smart for her own good. Sharp-tongued, independent, already applying to colleges that Celeste hadn't even dared to dream about at that age. And yet, lately, they kept missing each other, passing like planes overhead. She checked her phone again. No signal. No text from Amira since the morning. There was a message Celeste had written earlier and saved in drafts. I know I've been distant. I'm trying. This deal matters, but not more than you. Can we talk when I get back? She hadn't sent it. 45 minutes in. The tone in the cabin shifted again. The service was complete. Curtains closed behind them, dividing first class from business. A couple of passengers reclined with cocktails and earbuds. Celeste retrieved her tablet and opened the Notes app. She began reviewing slides for tomorrow's presentation, district-level engagement stats, AI diagnostics, long-term literacy impact. Every number a story, every percentage point a child. She scrolled until she landed on a photo, 3 rows of 6th graders in Texas, smiling with laminated tablets in hand, the first class to pilot Equinox tutoring module in both English and Spanish. That photo had been taped above her monitor for months, her true investors. But just as she began editing her remarks, Cynthia reappeared. This time, she brought a man with her. He wore a navy blazer, a plastic ID hanging from his lanyard, mid-40s, balding, pleasant but stiff. An in-flight supervisor, Dr. Morgan, Cynthia said with a careful tone. We need a moment of your time. Celeste lowered her tablet. Is there a problem? There seems to be a discrepancy with your seat upgrade, the man said, stepping in. Our system shows your ticket as business class. The first class upgrade was flagged as unusual, possibly a system error. Celeste blinked. I didn't request the upgrade. It happened automatically, be that as it may. He continued, we're just trying to confirm the source of the change. Celeste's voice remained calm. You can confirm it by checking the Airline app. It pushed the notification at 6:12 a.m. My assistant booked it through your business rewards portal. We're aware, Cynthia added. But due to heightened fraud attempts, we're being cautious. Celeste's grip on her tray table returned. Did you speak to anyone else in this cabin about their upgrade status? She asked. Neither replied. I didn't think so. Now passengers were looking. The man tried to soften his tone. Mom, we're just trying to verify. You've already scanned my boarding pass twice. I've complied with every request, and I'm still the only one being asked to prove I belong here. Cynthia stiffened. There's no need to be hostile. Celeste exhaled, slow and controlled. Then stop treating me like a threat. Across the aisle, someone pulled out a phone, discreet, but obvious. Cynthia noticed. Her smile returned, tight and corporate. I'm sure we'll sort this out quickly. But Celeste didn't respond. She looked straight ahead, her posture perfect, her eyes calm and cutting. Inside, though, the storm was building, not just from the insults she could handle those, but from the knowledge that it wasn't new, that even here, 35,000 feet in the sky, after years of proving herself, building from nothing, crossing every T, they could still make her feel like an intruder in a space she earned. The purser and the supervisor retreated briefly to confer at the galley. Celeste didn't move. The air around her felt thinner. Her heart beat steady, but hard. This wasn't over. Not yet. The silence in row 3 was no longer awkward. It was electric. Celeste felt it in her chest, a dull pressure behind her ribs. She'd tried to stay composed, to be reasonable, but reasonable hadn't gotten her anywhere so far. And now they were back. Cynthia Brandt stood in the aisle with the in-flight supervisor beside her, flanked this time by a second attendant younger, clearly uncomfortable, eyes darting to passengers who were now openly watching. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Dr. Morgan, I'm going to need to ask you to step toward the galley with us for a quick conversation." Celeste didn't budge. About what? He hesitated. "It's just again regarding the upgrade and verifying I'm not moving from my seat." Cynthia crossed her arms. Refusing to comply with staff requests is grounds for removal from the aircraft under FAA guidelines. The man next to Celeste shifted slightly, now visibly sweating. Celeste looked up at Cynthia with the kind of quiet that silenced everything around it. Her voice, when it came, was steady as steel. "Would you like me to call your CEO now, or after you're done embarrassing yourselves? Then that stopped them." "I'm sorry," the supervisor said, blinking. "You should be." Celeste reached into her leather tote, pulled out a slim phone, and began dialing. "You might want to pause before this becomes something far bigger than a seat dispute." Cynthia's mouth opened, closed. The young attendant beside her took a step back, whispering something to the supervisor. A second later, the man bent down toward Celeste's seat. "Dr. Morgan," he said more quietly, "there's no need for this to escalate. I'm sure we can sort it out. I am going to speak to operations and see what's happened on our end." Celeste raised her phone slightly, her thumb hovering above the speaker button. "You have 2 minutes." Row 2 was filming. Quietly. She could feel it. Further back in the cabin, whispers rose. The words racial profiling and black executive floated just loud enough to be heard but not traced. And somewhere in the clouds above Kansas, a flight that should have been uneventful had become a stage. As the staff retreated for now, Celeste leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She could feel the familiar duality stirring inside her, the activist and the executive. The activist was ready to rip the lid off this airline, to tweet, call, record, and fight back with every tool she had earned and inherited. But the executive, she was calculating, strategic, always weighing what action would preserve momentum versus what might derail it. She imagined the headlines. Black CEO removed mid-flight after dispute. Confrontation in first class goes viral. What did she say to deserve it? Even now, the burden of managing perception rested squarely on her shoulders. It was never just about what they did. It was always about how she reacted. The seatbelt light turned off. People shifted. She heard a cough behind her, the tap of plastic cups on tray tables. She opened her eyes. A woman across the aisle, blonde, late 50s, dressed in soft neutrals, leaned toward her slightly. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you're going through this," she said softly. "It's not right." Celeste gave a slight nod, acknowledging but not inviting further comment. Words like those, well-meaning, often came at the safe distance of observation, rarely action. Meanwhile, in row 14, Amira Morgan tugged her hood lower over her head. She'd heard the rustle of drama up front. Word had already reached her seatmate some black woman in first class was causing a disturbance. Amira didn't have to look to know who it was. Her stomach churned. She felt shame, but not the kind they wanted her to feel. Not the kind that meant agreeing or apologizing. It was the shame of watching your mother, the strongest person you know, being reduced to suspicion, of being forced to choose between staying quiet and staying loyal. She tapped her phone screen. No signal. No way to check in. Her breath quickened. Her fists clenched. Say something. Her brain screamed, stand up. Speak out. But her body wouldn't move. She was 17, in coach, alone, and terrified of getting dragged into something she didn't know how to control. Up front, the in-flight supervisor returned, walking with a different energy. Slower. Careful. We've confirmed the upgrade was approved through our corporate program, he said, avoiding eye contact. There was a system delay. I apologize for the confusion. Confusion? That word again, Cynthia added. We regret any inconvenience. Dr. Morgan. Celeste looked at them both, then spoke slowly. You owe me more than that. And not just me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This isn't confusion. It's pattern. It's policy disguised as protocol. It's caution applied unevenly. They blinked. A beat passed. Then Cynthia straightened. Mask back on. Would you like another beverage? Id liked silence. As they walked away, Celeste returned to her tablet. She typed 4 words into a blank document. This will not end here. Then she underlined it. 6 hours earlier, Chicago. 5:32 m. Equinox Learning Systems headquarters, South Loop. The office was still, city lights flickering across the window glass. A soft orange morning haze rested on the skyline, and downtown Chicago was waking up around her. But Celeste had been awake all night. She stood at the edge of her glass-walled corner office, minimalist, open, deliberate, sipping her 3rd cup of dark roast. Her heels were off, her navy travel suit still flawless. She didn't like to sit before big moments. She wanted to feel her body grounded, wanting her energy full. A digital clock on the wall ticked toward 5:33 m. Behind her, the conference table was scattered with material slide decks, printed mock-ups, the sleek Equinox tablet they were prototyping for California's district-wide rollout. She walked toward the table and picked up one of the printouts. On it, a side-by-side comparison, showing student progress in schools using Equinox AI literacy platform versus traditional instruction. The improvement line was steep, promising, but the margins that mattered most weren't on the graph. Celeste thought about Darnell, a boy she met in Oakland 2 months ago. He'd shown her his reading journal with misspelled words and proud sketches of the characters he was learning about. I didn't like reading before your tablet, he said, but now I do, 'cause it talks back to me like a friend. Celeste had smiled, but later she'd cried, because she remembered how, growing up in North Lawndale, there had been no fancy reading tablets, just old textbooks with names carved into them from 10 years ago. Teachers who tried their best, but were overworked and out of tools. She had gotten out, but not because the system worked, because her mother, Lorraine Morgan, retired librarian and tactical force of nature, had made sure she did. You don't get the luxury of slowness, Lorraine used to tell her. You're black, you're brilliant, and you're a girl. That means you'll have to be fast, sharp, and 5 steps ahead always. Celeste had internalized that like scripture. At 6:15 a.m., She was in a company car on the way to O'Hare. Her assistant, Malik, had messaged her from home. Confirmed upgrade. Seat 3A. We'll see you tonight for debrief. Knock their socks off. She typed back, trying not to knock heads instead. She wasn't joking. The California State Education Board was just another deal. It was a gateway to turning Equinox into a national standard. And it came with more than just money. It came with visibility. With risk. There was still a part of her that resisted being the face of anything. Because visibility came at a cost. It had in college, when she'd been the only black woman in her Stanford cohort. It had in her startup days, when investors said she was impressive, but intense. And it had now, as a CEO, when some headlines referred to her as a female founder instead of a leader, as if her gender and race were qualifiers. She wasn't naive. People liked their geniuses white and male. At the airport, she moved through TSA quickly. Her credentials worked like magic in some places, except in the eyes of gatekeepers who couldn't imagine a woman like her occupying a space like first class. The gate agent, a young white man, barely glanced at her ID. But when she said Morgan, he asked her to spell it, then stared at the screen for too long. This shows business class. He mumbled. Check again, she said. Calmly, he did. The screen refreshed. He nodded. Embarrassed. First class. Apologies. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Small things. On the plane. She entered the cabin and saw it row 3 window seat. Her usual. Except today. Every eye seemed to notice her arrival. The brief pause as she stepped in. The slightly longer glance from the white man already seated beside her. Like a record skipping. She kept walking, lifted her bag, slid in, back straight, unbothered. She'd done this 1,000 times. But something about today felt different, thicker, heavier. She thought of Amira, 17 now, and fierce, and tired. Tired of watching her mother work late nights and give speeches about equity to rooms full of people who profited from inequity. They'd argued last week. You talk about closing opportunity gaps, Amira had said. But when's the last time you sat still long enough to listen to mine? Celeste had known what to say. Because she'd been absent, not out of neglect, but out of mission. And Amira didn't care about mission statements. She cared about track meets and movie nights and pancakes on Sundays. Celeste had promised her, after California, "He'll slow down. I swear." She meant it. But now she was sitting in a seat she had earned, being asked again to prove she belonged. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're expecting a smooth ride to San Diego today." Celeste closed her eyes. The plane began to taxi. A vibration ran through the floor. Then came the slow ascent, the rising hum of altitude and altitude and altitude. Somewhere above the clouds, she tried to let herself breathe. But already, something was coming for her peace. She just didn't know how far it would go yet. The plane had been cruising smoothly for over an hour. Outside, the horizon was painted in soft tones, lavender fading into sunlit gold. Inside, first class was quiet, not serene tense, as if the air pressure had subtly changed. Dr. Celeste Morgan sat perfectly still in seat 3A, tablet balanced on her lap, but she wasn't reading any more. She was watching the slow-motion ripple of what was coming. The purser, Cynthia Brandt, had returned this time, not alone. The supervisor stood just behind her, posture stiff. The younger attendant from earlier hovered nearby, face pale. The tone was different, now harder to mask. "Dr. Morgan," Cynthia said. Her voice sharpened with performative politeness. We've received a report from another passenger. It seems there's concern that you were using threatening language earlier in the flight. Celeste blinked. Excuse me? The cabin stilled. Someone actually gasped. We're required to respond to any claims that suggest disruptive or aggressive behavior, the supervisor added quickly. Voice lowered, like that would soften the blow. Celeste looked around. Who made the report? Can't disclose that information, Cynthia replied. Of course not, Celeste said, standing up slowly. Her voice was calm, but her body tight, centered, prepared. A few heads turned. The man in 3B leaned away slightly. The woman in 2C was already recording. You're saying, Celeste said clearly, that someone reported me for being threatening, even though I haven't raised my voice, left my seat, or violated a single policy. It's a precaution, Cynthia insisted. We're trained to de-escalate. De-escalate what Celeste asked. Now facing the full cabin. The presence of a black woman in first class. The silence was deafening. Mom, the supervisor said, we're going to have to ask you to return to your seat and refrain from further. From further what she interrupted. Eyes on him. From objecting to being profiled. From asking why I've been questioned 3 separate times when no one else has. Cynthia's voice hardened. Please comply or we will notify the captain. Celeste let out a low breath. Do that. Cynthia blinked. What? Go ahead, Celeste said. Call the captain. Call airport security. Let them know you're preparing to detain a mother, a CEO, and a former federal education advisor because she dared to sit in the seat she was assigned. Now the woman in 2C wasn't just filming. She was uploading. Hashtag flying while black. The passenger muttered, typing. Let's go. In row 5, someone murmured, this is messed up. But it wasn't just whispers anymore. Celeste's voice carried now. Clear, controlled, devastating. You know what's funny, she said. Eyes locked on Cynthia. You've spent the last 2 hours trying to manage me like a threat instead of managing your own assumptions. You made a choice the moment I walked on this plane. Cynthia's expression flickered something between anger and disbelief. You chose suspicion over service, and you escalated it. Step by step. All the way to the behind them. The supervisor's radio crackled. He turned away to answer it. Celeste turned back to the cabin, as if claiming it fully now. I want every passenger here to remember this moment, because this isn't about turbulence, or safety, or airline policy. This is about visibility. This is about how quickly a black woman becomes a problem the moment she refuses to be quiet. In row 14, Amira Morgan had been gripping the armrest for 5 full minutes. She couldn't hear everything, but she knew what was happening. The voice she knew better than her own was echoing up the aisle, calm, composed, and completely surrounded. She stood up suddenly. Excuse me, she said, to the older man beside her. I need to get to the front. He looked confused. You're not allowed to her daughter. That didn't fully register. But her voice was so fierce, so full of fight, that the man stood up without another word. She walked quickly toward the front, passing rows of faces, some concerned, some indifferent, some glued to phone screens. As she approached first class, a male attendant stepped into her path. Miss, I'm sorry. This section is, she's my mother. Amira's voice didn't waver. And she's not alone. Celeste turned at the sound of her daughter's voice. Their eyes met. For a moment, nothing else existed. Cynthia faltered. The supervisor stepped back. The woman from 2C said, "She's not being aggressive. She's being targeted. I've got it all on video." The man from 3B finally spoke. I think this has gone too far." Cynthia froze, like a mask cracking. She opened her mouth to speak, but it was too late. The narrative had shifted, not by force, but by witness, by resistance, and by truth. 30 minutes later, when the flight landed in San Diego, there were uniformed officers waiting at the gate, but not for Celeste. They were there because Equinox Learning's legal team, already alerted, had contacted the airline's corporate crisis desk. The videos were already on Twitter. The hashtags were already trending. Celeste exited the aircraft without cuffs, without apology, and without a word to Cynthia, because now the world was watching. The terminal was bright, but not peaceful. Camera flashes greeted Dr. Celeste Morgan the moment she crossed through the jet bridge into the gate area of San Diego International Airport. Reporters lined the arrival corridor, some speaking urgently into phones, others raising mics. "Dr. Morgan, can you confirm if you were detained on the flight? Is it true you were accused of being aggressive by airline staff? What will Equinox Learning's response be to this incident?" Celeste didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap on her leather tote and kept walking, her daughter Amira beside her now. 2 Equinox team members, Malik, her assistant, and Talia Nguyen, director of communications, met them just beyond the gate, calm but wide-eyed. "Are you okay?" Malik asked, touching her arm. "I'm fine," Celeste said. "Let's go." But go didn't mean disappearing. It meant stepping into the storm. By the time they reached the car waiting at curbside, Twitter had gone nuclear. Social justice. Now Black CEO asked to prove she earned her seat mid-air. Airline's racist policy exposed. I'm flying while black, your Celeste Morgan, or Tech Watch News, breaking Equinox. Learning CEO detained during flight over seat confusion, passengers allege racial profiling. Video below. Hosblavity. She built the future of education. They tried to remove her from first class. She made one call, and now an entire airline is unraveling. The video, barely 90 seconds, was everywhere. Shot by the woman in 2C, it captured just enough the tone in Cynthia's voice. Celeste's measured defiance, Mira's emergence from coach, the collective shift in the cabin. Malik's phone kept vibrating. News alerts, press requests, statements from influencers, politicians, athletes, and activists pouring in. "CNN wants you live tonight," Talia said from the back seat, flipping between tabs on her iPad. MSNBC too. The Secretary of Education just posted about it. And Ava DuVernay retweeted the clip with a fire emoji and the words, "Watch this woman." Celeste leaned her head back against the headrest. It was happening. Faster than she'd expected. She had power, platform, press, all in one moment. But all she could feel was tired. At the hotel, a suite had been pre-booked. They swept inside without pause. Room service was already waiting. Bottled water, fresh towels, a chilled plate of fruit. Celeste stood at the window, watching the Pacific shimmer under a noon sun. "Have you spoken to the airline yet?" she asked Talia. They issued a boilerplate apology. "We're looking into it. Nothing substantial." "They will," Celeste said. "By tomorrow. They'll be begging for a meeting." Amira, still sitting on the edge of the couch, finally spoke up. "Why didn't you scream at them?" Celeste turned, surprised. "What, you were calm the whole time? You didn't yell? You didn't even cry?" "I don't cry in public," Celeste said gently. especially not when the world wants me to break." "But don't you want to break something?" Amira's voice cracked. "Because I do." Celeste crossed the room and sat beside her. "I used to," she said quietly. "I used to think breaking things was the only way to get them to change. But then I learned if you break it too early, they'll just replace you. If you hold long enough, they have to confront what they broke." Amira swallowed hard. "They didn't deserve your composure." "No," Celeste said. "But you did." 3 hours later, the airline called. Celeste didn't answer. Instead, Malik read the message aloud. A senior VP wanted to discuss the misunderstanding and offer a personal apology. "Misunderstanding," Celeste said flatly. "Always their favorite word." "Do we respond?" Malik asked. "Not yet," she replied. She turned to Talia. "Draft a statement." "Now, yes. Make it clear this wasn't about one bad employee. This is about a culture, a system. Write it in my voice, no buzzwords, no PR gloss." Talia nodded. "Got it." Celeste opened her laptop and began typing a memo to the Equinox board, detailing the events of the flight, her decision to take immediate public position, and her plans to use this moment to demand systemic change not just from the airline, but from the wider industries Equinox touched. She wasn't just going to call it out. She was going to leverage it. At 6:30 p.m., Celeste sat alone in the darkened suite, watching the first segment air live on CNN. The headline read, "Black Female CEO Profiled Mid-Flight National Outrage Builds." The clip played again, her voice strong. Her daughter's emergence from the back of the plane. The moment everything turned. Celeste felt something in her chest shift. Not pride, not anger, something deeper. Resolve. By 8:00 p.m., the airline stock had dropped 7%. Their press office issued a new statement. "We are deeply sorry to Dr. Morgan and her family. We are launching a full investigation and will be reviewing internal policies, training, and leadership procedures. We are committed to accountability and change." But Celeste was interested in apologies. She wanted transformation. And now she had leverage. At exactly 7:04 a.m. the next morning, Dr. Celeste Morgan placed the call. She didn't need Malik or Talia to set it up. She didn't wait for another official apology. She wasn't interested in crisis PR choreography. She wanted a direct line. CEO to CEO. Power to power. The number came from a private contact, Melanie Carver, an executive coach who had once warned Celeste Dant aimed to fit in the room, aimed to know who built it, what's behind the walls, and how to move the door. The call connected on the second ring. A smooth voice answered, guarded but alert. "This is Elliot Crane." Celeste didn't wait. "This is Dr. Celeste Morgan. You're the CEO of Sky Atlantic Airlines. And I'm the reason your board didn't sleep last night." There was a pause. "Then yes," he said. "You are." Crane was in his mid-50s, Ivy League Polish, practiced charm. His voice was measured, not defensive, not apologetic. A man who'd navigated scandals before. "I want to begin by saying he started." "No," Celeste interrupted. "We're past beginnings." Another pause. Longer this time. She continued. "Your people detained me in front of an entire cabin because I didn't look like what they expected in first class. They questioned my presence, my professionalism, and eventually my humanity. On your plane, under your name. During a business trip that could have defined a generation of students. I've read the reports." Crane replied. "Have you seen the video?" Celeste asked. "Yes." "Then you already know that I don't need another apology," she said, voice low but firm. "What I want now is leverage. You can't give me dignity back, but you can help build a world where my daughter doesn't have to fight for hers." Crane was silent again. "Then what do you want?" Celeste stood at the window of her hotel suite. Overlooking the marina, boats glided by in the morning sun, tourists strolled the boardwalk, but the world inside her chest was cold and sharp. "I want your airline to commit publicly to change," she said, "not just in response to me, but in response to the system you've upheld." Specific Celeste didn't hesitate. "One, full transparency. Release your internal bias training materials to the public within 30 days. I want to see what you teach or fail to teach about racial profiling and passenger discrimination. 2, third-party audit. Conduct a comprehensive equity review of all customer-facing policies and publish the results. 3, a seat on your corporate advisory board filled by a civil rights expert, not a figurehead, someone with authority. And 4, invest $10 million over the next 2 years in education technology for underserved public school districts. Partner with Equinox." "Learning to do it," Crane exhaled, not an irritation in calculation. "That's an ambitious list," he said. "No," Celeste replied. "That's the floor, not the ceiling." Crane asked for 48 hours. Celeste gave him 24. When she hung up, Amira was watching her from the couch. "You're making demands now?" she asked, a note of awe in her voice. "I'm negotiating," Celeste said, "from a position they didn't expect me to occupy." Amira smiled. "I guess that's how you shut down an airline without ever raising your voice?" Celeste returned the smile. "No. Baby, that's how you force them to listen." By noon, the story had evolved. What began as a viral incident had become a movement. Other passengers, black, brown, disabled, LGBTQ+, were sharing their own first-class but not welcome stories. One thread from a former airline employee went viral. "Bias ain't just a one-time mistake. It's how the system's been designed. I was trained to profile, not protect." By evening, 2 rival airlines issued public statements declaring their commitment to equity reform. One CEO tweeted support for Celeste's demands, calling them a necessary blueprint. Sky Atlantic, still silent. Celeste knew what that meant. Lawyers, boards, calculations. But she wasn't waiting anymore. At 7:00 p.m., she walked into a live interview on MSNBC. A standing ovation greeted her backstage. She wore a navy suit, small gold earrings, and a composure that burned hotter than any rage. The anchor leaned in. "Dr. Morgan, are you pursuing legal action?" "I'm pursuing structural change," Celeste answered. "A lawsuit would serve me. But what happened wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever been quietly removed from a space they earned because someone decided they didn't belong." The anchor nodded. "So what happens next?" Celeste looked into the camera. "That depends on whether Sky Atlantic understands this isn't about damage control. It's about responsibility. And if they don't get that—" She paused, then smiled not warmly, but with certainty. "Then they're about to learn what accountability really looks like." South San Diego, 10:42. Lorraine Morgan's apartment. The senior community complex was simple wide walkways lined with flower beds, a faded mural of ocean waves on the back wall. It didn't boast luxury, but it pulsed with life. Giggling grandchildren, chess games in courtyards, shuffling walkers and soft gospel humming through cracked doors. Celeste hadn't been here in months. Not since last fall, when her schedule had gotten too full. Again. She stood at the front door with Amira beside her. "You sure she knows we're coming?" Amira asked. Celeste knocked. "She knows everything before I do." The door swung open a moment later. "About damn time," said Lorraine Morgan. Age 74. Glasses perched low. Hair wrapped in a colorful scarf. Apron dusted with flour. I was about to file a missing daughter report. Amira grinned. "Hi, Grandma. Get in here." "Child," Lorraine said, pulling her into a hug, then turned to Celeste. "You look tired." "I am. You should be," Lorraine said. "Already walking toward the kitchen? The whole world's on fire and you're standing in the center like it's Sunday brunch." The apartment smelled like cornbread and lemon tea. Photographs lined the hallway. Celeste's college graduation, Michael holding a baby Amira, a framed newspaper clipping of Lorraine's retirement from the Chicago Public Library. Lorraine set 3 mugs on the table. "So," she said, sliding into her seat, "tell me everything." Celeste hesitated, then relayed the story, the seat, the suspicion, the confrontation, the recording. Amira filled in the blanks. Lorraine listened without interrupting. She didn't gasp or flinch. She didn't need to. When it was over, she sipped her tea and said, "You did good." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I got publicly profiled and almost removed from a plane." "And you stayed on your feet," Lorraine said. "With your voice, with your daughter watching. That's doing good." Celeste looked down at her hands. Lorraine saw it. "What's still bothering you?" she asked. "It's not just what happened," Celeste admitted. "It's what it means, that even after all these years, all this success, one person's suspicion can still try to reduce me to a problem." Lorraine nodded. "That's the truth, and that's not new." "I know," Celeste said, "but Amira saw it. She watched it unfold in real time. And now I don't know if I showed her strength or just another version of how we keep swallowing it." Amira spoke up quietly. "You showed me how to stand." Celeste looked at her. "You sure am more sure than I've ever been," Amira said. "I don't want to live small so someone else can feel big." Lorraine smiled. "She's got your fire. Maybe a little of my vinegar." They moved to the living room. Lorraine pulled an old binder from her bookshelf, newspaper clippings, speech notes, a printed email from Maya Angelou. She had once framed but never hung. "You know what we used to say in the library," she said. "Books are mirrors. You can only see yourself if someone bothered to write you in." She looked at Celeste. "That's what your life is now. Baby, a mirror. Every time you speak, some girl sees herself for the first time and thinks, 'Maybe I belong too.'" Celeste sat back. "Quiet. I don't want to be just a symbol," she said. "You're not," Lorraine said. "You're a woman who earned her place. And that scares people who still think power should only wear one kind of face." She leaned forward. "So don't shrink to make them comfortable. Don't negotiate your dignity. And don't think for 1 second that being tired means you're weak. It means you've been carrying what too many people drop." After lunch, Amira went for a walk in the courtyard. Celeste stayed behind. Lorraine turned to her. "So what are you going to do with this moment?" Celeste exhaled. "I'm still deciding." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "You already know. You're just scared it'll cost you something." Celeste laughed. "Still psychic." "No," Lorraine said. "Just lived." She stood up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were notes, contact lists, policy recommendations, a list of major school districts across the country that still lacked access to Equinox-style technology. "I've been doing my own research," Lorraine said. Celeste stared at her. "You built a playbook. I built a road," Lorraine corrected. "Now you build the bridge. Later, in the car." Celeste sat in silence. Amira glanced over. "You okay?" Celeste nodded. I am, for the first time in a long while. I know what I need to do next. What is it? Celeste smiled faintly. I'm going to make sure they remember this moment, not as a scandal, but as the day the door started opening. Sky Atlantic headquarters. Los Angeles, 48th floor. Executive conference room. 3 days after the flight, the boardroom was all steel, glass, and panoramic views built to signal dominance. Not dialogue, but today, the room felt cold, tight, nervous. 12 senior executives sat around the glossy oval table. Most had barely slept. A few had drafted resignation letters, just in case. One had muted their phone to keep the shareholder alerts from buzzing every 10 seconds. And seated directly across from CEO Elliot Crane was Dr. Celeste Morgan, not flanked by lawyers, but by her presence. Alone, composed, immovable. I didn't come here to hear apologies. She began. I came to hear your plan. Crane nodded. He looked tired, but still composed. We've reviewed your proposal, and we agree on most points. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Most. Crane deferred to Megan Ito, the airline's chief legal officer. She flipped open a leather-bound binder. We are prepared to issue a public apology, signed by the CEO and board chair. We will commit to a full third-party audit of all staff training and guest services policies. We are also willing to fund a multi-year partnership with Equinox Learning in support of education equity. Funding how much Celeste asked. $5 million. Ito replied. Celeste didn't blink. Double it. There was a pause. A few execs exchanged glances. Crane broke the silence. Well, discuss it, he said. Celeste leaned forward. No, you'll decide today, because my story is yours to contain. And every hour you spend negotiating is another hour your customers are asking why you haven't made it right. Regarding the board seat, Ito continued, we're proposing to create a new advisory position. It would consult with our executive team on issues of equity and inclusion, but wouldn't hold voting rights. Symbolic, then, Celeste said flatly. It's a starting place. Celeste looked around the room. You don't need symbols. You need systems. I asked for a real seat at the table, not a stool by the door. No one responded. She scanned their faces, mostly white, mostly male, some visibly sweating. I get it, she said. You've built a machine that runs exactly as you designed it to. But that design is the problem. Crane opened his mouth. Celeste held up her hand. I know what you're afraid of, that admitting fault will set a precedent, that giving power to someone like me means losing something for yourselves. She let that sit in the air. But here's what's really on the table today, transformation or obsolescence. Because people like me, professionals, black women, working mothers, travelers with receipts and resumes, we're not an anomaly anymore. We're your future customers, your investors, your regulators. If we're not in the rooms where decisions are made, those rooms won't last. Silence. Then, finally, a voice from the corner. Jorge Melendez, the only Latino executive in the room, cleared his throat. I agree, he said. Heads turned. Melendez looked at Crane. We've been reactive for too long. We need accountability that's baked into how we operate, not just how we respond when something explodes. Another pause. Then, Linda Forsyth, the head of corporate partnerships, added, and if we don't bring in voices like Dr. Morgan's now, we're going to lose talent and customers. Not eventually. Immediately. Crane exhaled. His mask cracked just slightly. All right, he said. Voice low. Voting rights. Real seat. Celeste nodded once. And the funding she asked? $10 million. Crane confirmed. They took a short recess. Celeste stepped outside into the hallway and called Amira. You got them, her daughter asked. I got something, Celeste said. It's not a win, it's a shift. Amira smiled on the other end. Mom, sometimes shifts are louder than victories. Celeste didn't speak for a moment. She was thinking about the young gate agent who'd questioned her identity, about the crew who had watched her with suspicion, about all the microaggressions that hadn't gone viral. Then she said, You still want to go to law school? Maybe, Amira replied. But I also want to build something. Celeste smiled. Good, because we're about to change an industry. Back in the boardroom, Crane stood as she re-entered. We'll issue a joint press release, he said, framing this not as a settlement, but a structural transformation. Celeste nodded. And ill speak publicly, but on my terms. Understood. He extended his hand. Celeste looked at it for a moment, then shook it. The cameras clicked. The headlines wrote themselves. But this wasn't a photo op. It was a warning shot. The summit was over. The real work was just beginning. Los Angeles, California. 1 week later, her name was Bree Delgado. She was 36, a freelance copy editor, Latina, mother of 2, on her way to visit her sister in Sacramento when her flight got rerouted through San Diego due to overbooking. She hadn't planned to be on Flight 227. She certainly hadn't planned to record a moment that would change the trajectory of a national airline. It was bravery, Bree said, staring into the lens of a podcast camera. It was reflex. The interviewer leaned in. But something made you reach for your phone. Bree nodded. Yeah, something familiar. She was seated in 2C, directly across the aisle from Dr. Celeste Morgan. When the flight attendant paused beside Celeste's seat, voice sharp, posture tense, Bree's body tense too. Not from fear, from recognition. It was the tone, she said. That particular tone that says, You don't belong here. She had heard it before, when her father had been asked if he was in the right line at a hotel, when she, a teen, had been stopped for looking suspicious while carrying a backpack, when her husband, a firefighter in uniform, had been mistaken for airport staff. It's always subtle. Bree said, But you never forget it. And when I heard that voice, I knew something was wrong. She hadn't expected what followed. The escalation, the disbelief on Celeste's face, the restraint. She could have snapped, Bree said. God knows she had every right. But instead, she sat straighter. Like, even her posture was proof. Bree had started recording halfway through the interaction, instinctively tilting her phone without drawing attention. She thought maybe she'd delete it later. Maybe it wouldn't matter. But when Amira appeared, when the teenager came rushing from the back of the plane, trembling, and Celeste simply placed a calm hand on her shoulder, Bree knew she couldn't stay silent. I thought about my own daughter, she said, and how that girl was learning, in real time, what it meant to be black in America, how excellence doesn't shield you, how calm doesn't save you. So Bree posted the video. She captioned it, Black woman, clearly a professional, being interrogated in first class. Her daughter comes from the back of the plane. Everyone sees it. No one says anything. But you should watch this. She didn't expect it to go viral. She certainly didn't expect reporters to call, or trolls to find her email, or her kids' school to ask if they needed increased security. But she also didn't expect the letters. Dozens, then hundreds, from people who said, I was in coach. I saw it happen. I didn't speak up. Thank you for doing what I didn't. I showed your video to my boss. We're redoing our customer service training. My daughter saw your video and said, 'She looks like Mommy.' And I cried." A week after the flight, Celeste called her personally. "I just wanted to say thank you." She said, "You didn't have to do anything, but you did." Bree had replied, "It was the least I could do." Celeste paused. "No, the least would have been silence. You did the most." Now, sitting across from the podcast host, Bree wrapped up her story. "I didn't start a movement," she said. "I just refused to pretend it wasn't happening." The host asked one final question. "Do you think things will actually change?" Bree thought for a moment. "I think they already have," she said. "Not completely, not fast enough, but something cracked open. And we're all walking through the gap now." That evening, after tucking her kids into bed, Bree scrolled through the latest updates on the story she'd helped spotlight. Sky Atlantic had announced a partnership with Equinox Learning, $10 million invested in underserved schools, a new board seat filled by a civil rights educator, mandatory restorative justice sessions for gate agents and flight staff. Celeste Morgan was trending again this time for testifying before Congress. And Bree, she was back to editing memoirs and proofreading grant proposals. But she kept the thank you letters in a shoebox by her desk, just in case she ever wondered if pressing record had been worth it. Community Mediation Center, downtown Los Angeles, 9:00 private session. No media allowed. The room smelled faintly of lavender. The walls were soft gray. There were no microphones, no cameras, no stage, just a circle of chairs and a tray of water glasses that no one touched. Celeste sat on one side, calm, straight-backed, dressed not for business, but for honesty, a soft blue sweater, slacks, no makeup. Across from her sat Lauren Hale, the gate agent who had stopped her boarding. Beside Lauren, Craig Timmons, the flight supervisor who'd made the final call to involve security. And in the corner, almost collapsed into herself, was Teresa Chan, the flight attendant who had stood silently as it all unfolded. The session was led by Dr. Elise Kumari, a restorative justice facilitator known for making uncomfortable rooms survivable and transformative. "We're not here to relitigate," she began. "We're here to understand impact and to face what truth demands of each of us." She turned to Celeste. "Dr. Morgan, you may begin when ready." Celeste spoke quietly. Her voice was not bitter. That made it even harder to hear. "I was on my way to pitch a partnership that could have changed how thousands of students access education." She looked at Lauren. "But to you, I was a question mark. Not a name, not a passenger, not a professional." She turned to Craig. "To you, I was a protocol to be contained, a disruption, not a customer." Then finally, to Teresa, and to you, I was someone who could be watched, but not spoken for. None of them looked up. "I'm not here to shame you," Celeste said. "I'm here because if you can't see me as human, even now, then none of this means anything." "Dr. Kumari turned to Lauren Hale. "Ms. Hale, please reflect what you've heard about how your actions impacted Dr. Morgan." Lauren's voice cracked almost immediately. I profiled you." She forced the words out. "You looked successful, but not in the way I was used to. I thought maybe your ticket was wrong. Maybe it was someone else's. I didn't think I was being racist. I thought I was being careful." Celeste's eyes didn't move. "I see now that my idea of careful was built on assumptions that were never challenged," Lauren whispered. "And I didn't challenge them, because I didn't have to. Until you." Craig Timmons spoke next. I've been in this job 18 years. My job is to de-escalate. But I escalated because I saw a black woman refusing to lower her voice, and I made it about control, not truth. He looked up, finally, and I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I lost sight of what my badge means. It's supposed to represent safety, not shame. Then it was Teresa's turn. She spoke without looking up. I should have said something, she said, tears slipping past her lashes. I wanted to. I knew what was happening, and I just stood there. Silence filled the room. Celeste inhaled. You didn't just stand there, she said softly. You turned away. Teresa nodded, weeping openly now. I didn't know how to speak in a system that never taught me it was okay to interrupt power. Dr. Kumar gave them a moment. Then she asked, Dr. Morgan, what do you need from them from this space to move forward? Celeste looked at each of them. I don't need your guilt, she said. I need your work. She turned to Lauren. I want you to train the next generation of gate agents not just on policy, but on people. To Craig, I want you to write down what it feels like to be wrong, to be the person who misjudged someone's humanity. Then I want that read aloud anonymously at every flight operations orientation. To Teresa, I want you to mentor the quiet ones, the ones who feel small. Tell them silence is never safety. She paused. And I want this session published, not the video, the transcript, all of it. So the next time someone says, this isn't who we are, they'll know exactly what we've been. Lauren raised her hand, slowly. May I ask a question? Celeste nodded. Do you forgive us? A long pause. No, Celeste said plainly, because forgiveness is not the point. Growth is, and that's still on you. When the session ended, no one stood for a while. The room felt heavier, but not darker. They had walked through something irreversible, not closure, not absolution, but recognition. And in that space, something unspoken began to breathe. Outside, in the parking lot. Amira waited with Lorraine. How did it go? Amira asked as her mother approached. Celeste looked up at the morning sun. Her voice was quiet. I think they finally saw me. 3 months later, Equinox Learning Headquarters, San Francisco. The new office wasn't flashy, at least. Not in the traditional Silicon Valley sense. It didn't have slide tunnels or nap pods, but it had glass-walled classrooms where kids from underfunded districts connected live with mentors across the country. It had coding labs humming with energy, and every hallway was lined with student art. At the center of it all stood Dr. Celeste Morgan, quietly watching from behind the tinted window of her office. Her reflection overlapped with the kids moving through the halls like it was a second skin. Dr. Morgan. Her assistant peeked in. They're ready for you. Celeste turned, straightened her jacket, and walked out to face the team she'd built from the ashes of a humiliating moment and turned into a revolution. Conference Room B, the Equity Advisory Board. The board had met every month since its formation. Diverse in every sense age. Ethnicity, industry, philosophy, a civil rights historian, a policy expert, a tech ethicist, a single mother who worked in airline customer service. And yes, one more face in the circle, Lauren Hale. She was no longer employed by Sky Atlantic, but after completing the Restorative program and publicly sharing her experience in a televised town hall, she'd asked Celeste if she could help not from a place of atonement, but education. I've been inside the broken system, Lauren had said. Maybe I can help fix it from the outside. Celeste had hesitated, then nodded once and invited her to join. Today's meeting was focused on expanding Equinox's new training program, not just in airlines, but hospitals, banks, and school districts. They called it Human First. It taught bias recognition, structural empathy, and personal accountability through storytelling, lived experiences, and immersive simulations. Not one-size-fits-all training, but one change at a time transformation. Celeste walked in and nodded to the room. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "When this board was created, it was reactive. We were responding to a crisis. Now, we're building something proactive." She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with a list of 20 new partner organizations. "Each of these institutions has agreed to adopt our curriculum," she continued, "not because of a PR disaster, but because they believe it's time to lead differently." The room broke into soft applause. Celeste smiled. "This is the part they don't tell you about justice," she said, "that it can grow." Later that evening, Harborview Senior Living Community, Atlantic City. It had become ritual. Sunday dinner with Lorraine Morgan. Tonight, Celeste brought not just her daughter, Amira, but her laptop. "Tell me why I'm being shown charts over cornbread," Lorraine said, already skeptical. Celeste grinned. "Because I thought you'd want to see this." She pulled up a live dashboard. Sky Atlantic Bias Intervention Program. Month 1 results. 42% employees trained, 9,000 feedback surveys collected. 96% reported higher empathy for diverse passengers. 43% expressed interest in continued training. 14 former gate agents now serving as equity liaisons. Lorraine's eyebrows rose. "Well, damn," she said. "That's a harvest?" "It's a start," Celeste replied. Amira brought in dessert. She'd started college that fall, majoring in sociology, minoring in education, still volunteering at local after-school programs, still asking hard questions at family dinners. "You ever think about how weird it is," she asked, "that all of this training programs, policy shifts, media appearances, it all started because someone didn't think you looked like you belonged in first class?" Celeste leaned back. "I think about it every day." "Do you ever wish it had happened differently?" Celeste didn't answer immediately. "I wish the world were different," she said, "but I'm not sorry for what we've done with what it gave us." The next morning, U.S. House of Representatives, Education and Labor Committee. Hearing Celeste stood at the podium, testifying before lawmakers about racial bias in public institutions. She shared statistics, data, outcomes, but then she paused and told a story, not of the plane, not of the arrest, of Brie Delgado, the woman in seat 2C who had recorded it all. She wasn't a journalist, Celeste said. She wasn't trained in civil rights law. She was just someone who knew silence wasn't neutral. She looked around the chamber. That's how change happens. Not in lightning strikes, but in everyday choices. One moment of courage. One question asked differently. One policy rewritten because someone finally listened. She paused. This isn't about teaching people to behave. It's about teaching institutions to see. Final scene: Equinox classroom, virtual session with students. Celeste ended her day the way she loved most, sitting in on a virtual session with high schoolers from Detroit, Baton Rouge, and Oakland. "What's one thing you learned this week?" the mentor asked. One student, a black girl named Kayla, unmuted. "I learned I don't have to be smaller to be safe," she said. "And if someone says I don't belong, that doesn't make it true." Celeste felt something catch in her chest. Kayla didn't know her name, didn't know she was watching. And that was the point. Change that doesn't need credit. Legacy that moves quietly. Justice, not as punishment, but as possibility. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam fists or storm out. She changed the entire conversation. What happened to Dr. Celeste Morgan on Flight 227 could have ended with a private apology and a quiet payout. Instead, it became a ripple through airports, classrooms, corporate boardrooms, and dinner tables, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it sounds like a daughter asking, "Do I belong?" or a former gate agent saying, "I was wrong," or a CEO choosing not revenge, but reform. But make no mistake, what she endured was not a misunderstanding. It was the reflection of a deeper system, one that polices presence, that doubts excellence, that quietly whispers, "You don't belong here." And yet she stayed. She spoke. She built. So ask yourself, what would you do if someone saw your success and still only saw your skin? If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of someone who needs to be seen like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that challenge, uplift, and transform. Because this story may be ending, but the conversation is just getting started.